Okay, I'm going to speak about how um, Jesus wants us to approach marriage. This is not the way man himself wants us to approach marriage. Just Jesus, just Yeshua. You can do Hebrew version, Messianic type version to understand. It's the same Hebrew. Language translates very easily between English and Hebrew. It's not like super confusing. You won't. It's like translating between Spanish. It's not a confusion type of language like a deep-rooted indigenous culture, no one that's been separated from all the other nations for so long. So Hebrew's translatable into English. Okay? So there's no way you can miss this. Um, this is not the way that denominations describe marriage. There's various denominations. That some are more Catholic based, some are less Catholic based, whatever. Um, Some are closer to the Middle East culture, some are further away. It just depends on what's going on. So you can find pockets like in Pakistan. They're wearing headscarves. And if these if there's a woman that's wearing a headscarf and she's following Jesus, quote unquote, she's better off in her faith following Jesus with that headscarf than a westernized far left Christian. And they call themselves Christians. That's all they do. This is including the far left Christian rock band stuff. It just gets so phony, baloney, and hate sounding. The tones of the sounds and the music, and it sounds so far left, it's disgusting. You might as well just listen to secular music and love songs, because you carry those tunes with you all the way to your deathbed. I'm going to give you a hint. If a man is going to sing some love songs at 20, he'll be singing them all the way until he's 80 plus years old. It's embedded in the human system to want to sing music. Okay, so kind of watch out for things that could indicate that a man or a woman has no clue where they're going when it comes to marriage topics and sexuality topics. There's very obvious clues like in Hollywood, and stay away from some of those cult traps they produce. You can see it. I know what I'm saying. It's on the internet today. They're more expressive of it even more now than ever before. It's like before you could kind of hide it, but now they just don't even care. They just express these way out there beliefs. So anyway, I'm going to talk about how Jesus wants man to approach marriage, because he is going to be the only one that's 100% sin-free. Every other man, every other musician, every other politician, every other so-called leader in a denomination is going to fail compared to his words, compared to his promise, compared to his understanding. Okay? It's always going to be that way. Always. Forever and ever. Heaven and earth will pass away, but his words and his actions will not pass away. Where did he live? In Israel. Okay. So, right there. He already lived in Israel. So all marriage beliefs outside of the context of Israel connection are nothing. Religions that falsify the Jewish people and Israel are null. Do not listen to those those themes of advice, okay? So what I'm talking about is anti-religious, anti-Israel cults, which there's many of them in the Middle East today. You know, they might wear a headscarf, they might not, I don't know. Depends on the variant, okay? Jesus went to the wedding in Cana, so he was socially involved with marriage. He knew what it was. He's not unfamiliar with marriage, okay? He was socially embedded, like totally there. His mother went with him or whatever. You can read about the wedding in Cana, okay? If there's something socially attacking Israel, they will not speak on anything good as far as marriage is concerned. Don't listen to them. They're liars. Their historical records about the foundation of their religion is very apparent. I mean, there's many Middle East practices that are okay, in neutral, like fasting and whatnot, and the cultural practices of how they make bread or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the complete anti-Israel cult nature. Don't listen to it. It's useless. It's empty. The modest clothing, that's not, it's a neutral balance. You can do modest clothing. Everyone has a door in their house, so why not? Who cares? Okay? I don't, yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, speaking of modesty, modesty helps in marriage beliefs, okay? Male or female. I've heard of women who have been married to less driven males, and they go out and they go to these dirt clubs and dress up. They are the one. The male is the one who dresses immodestly. So it's either or. If there's no modesty, meaning privacy for your door, for your marriage, you really aren't listening to what's true. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now, everyone could have sin issues at any time. Don't think everyone is free from stuff. Just because any time, meaning we don't always know who's going to get early onset dementia. We don't know. But in general, if it's a marriage, it's going to have a door on it. Okay? All right. Here, marriage is not to be idolized. There's, I might be speaking on certain, I may be hitting the ice, like the tip of the iceberg. I'm not speaking about the full thing. So, Jesus himself really didn't want marriage itself to be idolized. When John the Baptist was beheaded, he was speaking on behalf of a false marriage. But it was a one-man, one-woman marriage, so to speak. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But either way, it was a divorce and remarriage. Okay, and there's other history lessons behind why King Herod was so nasty. He had some really crazy behaviors. You look up the history of King Herod from the Nativity story. He was a crazy, wild, wicked man. They had marriage. Okay, wasn't good on the social aspects. Okay, all right. Next thing with marriage. Okay, Jesus, he is the groom. The church is the bride. The saved body of believers, basically the born again body of believers. And the church has to have an order to it, has to have some sort of system that works with truth. Okay? You can't just do whatever you want. The church has to be on the foundation of truth. There's no way. The church is the bride. He is the groom. He's the creator of the universe. He's a part of the creation. He was there at the beginning of creation. Okay? That should be clear. Okay. Next one. This kind of goes back to the beginning, or the first thing I was talking about. Israel is in covenant. Basically, it's a marriage covenant. It was in covenant at Mount Sinai. You might say, oh, they're the Jewish people, they're in covenant. You might say something like that. You might say, oh, they have features, all right, and they ask, are you Jewish or something like that. Whatever that, whatever trail that means, the family tree trail is whatever that means. Sometimes it's this and that. Okay. It's actually just Israel. It's not only the pocket of Ashkenazi Jewish, only the pockets of Mizrahi Jewish, only the pocket of Sephardic Jewish. No, it's just Israel. Just Israel, okay? Or there's Ethiopian Jewish, whatever, okay? It's including all nations that are part of Jacob that are included. So there's hidden history records of Sudanese Jewish people. And then they have these history trails of black Hebrew Israelites, if you've heard of them. They're kind of goofy, but they might have some history records that expose false teachings from false churches. So sometimes it's like, oh, I see, there is a history trail around in the slave days. Yeah, so, and it has some truth to it, but it's not really fully truth because DNA patterns don't show that, So anyway, it's all nations that are of Jacob are included. Israel is in covenant, just Israel, okay? Yeah, that includes people that are tribe, lost tribes of Israel. Okay, and variations. Okay. Next one. The one man and one woman in a marriage is only a general rule. That doesn't justify that the marriage is good, 100%. It doesn't justify that that marriage is free from verbal abuse or psychological abuse or any of that. You could have a fallen spouse that totally fell into infidelity or something. They could come back and it would be a better marriage than it was before because they felt the gap was sin in the first place, and so they figured out, oh, let's get rid of the sin. Then it works better. So it's only a general rule, and you're always going to have to take care of outsiders outside of your marriage. Otherwise, you're not really in a true social bond, okay? You don't go to a wedding banquet and there's only one person there. So there's going to be at least 1, 2 people at a marriage. You don't have just one. Okay, and then it'd be great to have at least one witness. Okay, so the one speaking on behalf of the marriage. Anyway, the one man and one woman is only a general rule. It's just a paper trail. Okay. And you can have a marriage at the courthouse. Whatever. You could go without using the government systems of records. You don't need the government to decide what one man and one woman rules are. Why does the government have to decide what a marriage license is? They're making this up. It's fake. It's all tax dollars is what it is. The tax dollars for the courthouse and the politicians. Tax dollars going to the politicians and the courthouses. Anyway, that's only a general rule. Next one. Okay, there's marriages that involve incest or cousin marriage. You know, Abe and Sarah were closely related. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were all closely related. I think Moses himself was a product of an incest environment. So, and then there's cousin marriage. So I've heard of that. It's more common in the Middle East to this day. There's people around that exist that said that their own biological parents were cousins, close cousins too. Okay, and they had normal features. So, in a general rule, when you don't have the ability to bring forth children anyway as a man and a woman, no one's going to know if you're getting married to your cousin. No one would know. I wouldn't recommend that because there's so many other people. There's so many fish in the pond, so to speak. So there's things that are out there, but sometimes people could get married and not know that they're closely related. I don't know, but serious incest is obvious. The real way that we know a person would know if it's incest is if they're socially involved when they're growing up with so and so, knowing who so and so is, and an adoption, a person who's adopted might not know. Okay. The pro-life movement. Okay, I'm going to state this clearly. It is only in general situations. It is not the full battleground that we face. There's other pro-life groups that have nothing to do with following Jesus. Okay. A secular atheist could be pro-life simply because they realize that a woman's body is actually improved by carrying full life. Okay. And so they decided, let's make sure that we encourage life in the womb and to keep it there. Okay. A woman's life is improved by raising children. That's pro-life, and even a secular person who thinks about things can think about that. Okay? So it is only general situations, not the full battleground. There have been extremely conservative people. You can think of the really negative situation of what happened with the Duggars. Yes, they were extremely pro-life, but their children were not skilled on how to handle their lust. They just weren't skilled. It appeared like they were getting it, but it was only outward appearance. It was not inward. They weren't getting the inward motivations. Basically, if you're working in an ER or a healthcare
Powering
situation,
on.
you know what it means to control the eyes and the ears and whatever. You have to be skilled on that. Whatever happened with the Duggars is whatever. And there's variations of like Muslim groups that are pro-life. And what do? They do terrorism. Okay. That's their final destination. That's their only final destination. Anti-Israel junk. They're all pro-life. So, and they're very religious. Okay. All right, next thing. Pro-choice in a marriage is something that could happen in a woman's body by the body itself, its own choices. Or, a woman could have gone through something and she can be redeemed. So pro-choice is something that can happen to any woman, any time she's married while she's in maternity stages, OB department needs type stages. So pro-choice is something that could happen by the body's own choices. You have to be aware that you need safety measures no matter what. The extreme pro-choice says everything about abortion is going to solve a woman's problem. That's a lie. That's a complete lie. Okay. I have another video on that, and it's like, no, you need to have the ER work, which supplies needs for the bleeding woman. You need the ER doctor. You need to have access to the ER and the OB departments and the DNCs. That is for every woman. That is real women's health, okay? The other stuff is folly when it comes to miscarriages and pregnancies. Just folly, wickedness, hiding sins, whatever. Miscarriages have always happened. Every generation has them. Anyway, next. Lust is bad for marriage. That's what Jesus says. Remember, I'm talking about what Jesus is coming up with. And going back up here to the pro-choice thing, there was a bleeding woman. Jesus healed the bleeding woman. Okay. So, Jesus knows about things with women's bodies. Okay? And he knows that lust is bad for marriage. That's obvious. They're looking at something else outside the door too much. Okay? There's times where people are around and they need to know how to move the eyes in the right direction. There's times where you can kind of admire someone else, but it's not like look at how Abraham dealt with Sarah. He said, okay, this is enough. You have features. Don't go through that door. Don't go over near those people. Whatever. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think all of them had some sort of features among. You look it up. See how they acted toward the fine feature people, or fine feature conditions of the women. Okay. They knew lust was around even back then. They knew what lust was. Oh, they're not blind to that. Not blind. Okay. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They weren't blind. They weren't blind people. Okay. All right. The next one, brother marriage, written in Luke chapter 20, and somewhere else in the Bible too. But anyway, it talks about the brother marriage, multiple different brothers marrying one woman. Now, this passage, Jesus never says that it's wrong to do this practice, but he is saying that it is not a salvation issue. And was it Sadducees or something that's asking this? It's not because they actually care about the woman or they care about marriage itself. They're doing this because they're not saved. They're asking these questions. They don't want salvation from Jesus. They're asking these types of questions because they're politicians, basically. Note how in this passage the woman doesn't bring forth children, and they are using a pro-life cause to justify that alone is marriage. So they're trying to make it look like marriage itself only revolves around pro-life causes. That's not truth, okay? So they're coming up with false ideas about marriage, okay? And a woman actually could practice this brother marriage thing. Like literally. I doubt it would happen. 7 brothers, a lot of years in there for a death. Must have been a pretty bad plague or something, and the woman alone is alive. I don't know. It's a pretty crazy situation, but it really illustrates something. Politicians do not care about your marriage. No. These marriage license specialists at the courthouse, they don't care about your marriage. They don't. They won't. Only Jesus can fully justify what's right and wrong in marriage, according to his plans. Okay? Notice how those guys in Luke chapter 20 were trying to justify some sort of pro-life business. What are they talking about? They want to justify that marriage only revolves around pro-life. They don't understand that Jesus himself is the author of life. He's the author of human life. They don't care. Do you understand? A woman could actually practice this brother marriage thing. Or even a man. I don't know. Like, what if it's sisters instead? Like, woman dies, childbearing, every time. A man could even practice this. It doesn't matter. What they're trying to do is justify their version of marriage and their ideas about marriage. Jesus doesn't allow that. He steps his foot down and says, you know what? It's not about that. Okay, read it carefully. Okay, next one. Such were some of you, former followers of the non-faith in Jesus based an issue. So in the Bible passage, somewhere in there, it says, like, Paul was writing and he says, such were some of you. And there's dirt in like the Corinthian churches. You can find things in the New Testament passages, and you'll find the such were some of you. So they were dirt path people. They were the college fling party groups. They thought no one's watching. They thought no one cares about their body when it comes to marriage and all this and that. They thought only the court system cares about my marriage license. Such were some of you. They were former followers of non-faith in Jesus. They didn't put their hope in Jesus when it comes to marriage and all this and that. Okay? Don't be that. I mean, when you know what such were some of you and you fully understand it and you fully incorporate all ideas from the scripture, not just whatever you want, including like the 7 brothers marriage situation, and you really see what it says, it's like such were some of you. Even if you're in a one man and one woman marriage. Such were some of you. Remember, he alone is the author of creation. Such were some of you. Who knows? I don't know. There could be someone in a marriage right now, one man and one woman, and they have a lying, cheating spouse, and they're so wicked that that's a trafficker or something. I don't know who this is speaking to. Or they're in a one man, one woman relationship, and one of the spouses is into far left gender flip-flop junk. Okay? It's going to be the same thing. Such were some of you for all these cases. Just putting one man and one woman together doesn't make it right. Only Jesus fully justifies things. Okay? He can see everything. He knows every nation, tribe, tongue, whatever. Okay? Next thing. Same boat will float. Okay, if you're on the same boat, that boat will float when it comes to marriage. Okay? Keep this in mind. Jesus was Jewish. He spoke Hebrew. He didn't speak English. He didn't speak Chinese. He didn't speak Ethiopian tongue. He spoke Hebrew. He knew Aramaic as well, which is another kind of pocket. He is fully Jewish. What does it say on his cross? Okay? So, that means same boat, it will float. If you're not on the same boat, your marriage beliefs aren't going to float. So, that means, because of this, he practiced the Moses account. That includes Talmudic things sometimes. Not all the time, but in general, he probably heard about it. He went to synagogue, things like that. So, Jesus was Jewish, and he practiced Moses account things. Okay? If you ever hear of something called the parashah reading sections and things like that, you kind of get the idea. Okay? Keep those things in mind. If there's no Moses account, there's no understanding behind marriage and what Jesus believes about it. It just won't work. Same boat, will float. Different boat, totally ignoring Moses' account, not gonna float. No way. Okay? So you can listen to Ben Shapiro. You can even listen to Mayim Bialik. Mayim Bialik sometimes listens to Moses' account. But you have to be on the right page. Okay? last thing I'm going to talk about. There's more you can look up. You can figure it out. Okay, you getting the point. Okay, should be getting the point. The Akari Moat section of the Bible. Not to be confused or altered with so-called modern-day judgments on sexuality and human nature and social things. Okay? We're in the modern era. I get it. We can move in fast ways through the internet, whatever. Some things do not change. Read the Akari Moat section very carefully. It is speaking on behalf of what is like that's speaking about the holiest day of the year. There's a reason why it's in this special section. Keep in mind, when Jesus was reading in the synagogue, he probably had a familiarity with the parashas divisions. I don't know when they developed those. They're there. Boom. They divide out the Torah. Boom. In perfect sections. Because the Hebrew literature, the Hebrew original language is that perfect. Anyway, the Akari Moat section is Leviticus 16:1 through 18:30. And in there you will find the good and the bad in the relationship and which combination should be there when you're doing this and that in the maternity ward, so to speak, or creating the children. You shouldn't be doing this or that, obviously. And Jesus came through Mary, and Elizabeth was a Levite, so she was, Levites familiar with Leviticus, obviously. So something about the trails comes through Levitical accounts, and the Akari Moat section kind of leads you into that stuff. So it points out what is true then, as far as how Jesus' own blood was there. It says very clearly, quote unquote, life of the flesh is in the blood. What is allowed as far as blood conditions are concerned? What combinations should you be having in your social environment when you're in your marriage? Okay? Yeah, you can have one man-woman relationship, but then right in that section it talks about in-law so-and-so who you shouldn't be relating to. Kind of gives you a little bit of clues that there's other things. And obviously it talks about that the Sodom and Gomorrah lifestyles, the male and male, isn't acceptable. It's an abomination. So that's out. If you don't agree with the Moses accounts in the Akari Moat section, you probably don't get it. They talk about things this way and that way in our modern day culture. We're not modern. We're the same. We are the same. I mean, like, has water quantity and content changed for the human body since those days? I don't think so. Beliefs and patterns changed, and interactions changed through history lessons. Europeans had no idea what the Mississippi River was within 300 years ago. But we've gone through World War II. Are we better? Read Leviticus 16:1 through 18:30. I don't want to read that. Why not? I thought you said you were free from the sin of World War II. Try again, okay? Look at this the correct way. Thanks, bye.